situations, and times. Some prefer diplomatic intervention, others military. Some prefer humanitarian activities, others covert action. And some prefer foreign aid mixed with Christian proselytizing, others prefer aid meant to break down traditional religious conventions, such as funds for family planning in conservative Muslim states. From Hillary Clinton and John McCain to George Soros, and down to the elite's lowest-ranking man or woman, all share in one near-religious belief in the role of the United States in the world: unrelenting intervention. America today lives in what can be described as a prolonged Cold War hangover, an environment in which our governing elite's perception of the world seems to have frozen stiff on the day the Berlin Wall fell. On that day, the United States did indeed stand as the world's only superpower, ready to undertake the elder Mr. Bush's dream of building the New Jerusalem. Sadly and inexplicably, the first Mr. Bush and his two successors failed to see that with the Cold War's end, the major keeper of world peace and order, the U.S.-USSR rivalry, and especially the sainted doctrine of mutually assured destruction, known as MAD, had exited the scene, ushering in a steadily rising tide of pervasive international disorder that has deposited the world in a new age of barbarity. It is now clear that mutually assured destruction provided much of the world with a halcyon half-century of substantial peace and gradually increasing prosperity. Pax Atomica, if you will. We now are living through the last stages of Pax Atomica's peace and prosperity, but America's governing elite has thus far done its best to patch up and maintain the illusion that the old girl has lots of life in her. She does not. U.S. politicians, generals, academics, and pundits can be forgiven for being a bit intoxicated and Pollyannish during the first heady post-Soviet years. But who would have expected this normal reaction to harden into an apparently permanent mindset? Well, Osama bin Laden apparently did. In September of the fifth post-Cold War year, this lanky and quiet Saudi Arabian declared war on the United States. Bin Laden's declaration of war received little notice in Washington's halls of power. In his treatise, bin Laden carefully explained that history had resumed, that the Muslim religion was alive, thriving, and angry, and that the Cold War's limits to worldwide conflict had been sundered, and that war to the finish had reassumed its traditional and proper station in human affairs. In short, bin Laden announced that many Muslims were less interested in building a New Jerusalem than in conquering Israeli-occupied Old Jerusalem. Since 1996, American leaders have floundered around almost comically in trying to defend elements of American life that are not under attack: liberties, freedoms, and elections. Indeed, their campaign to defend these unattacked elements of America's political and social life is one of the strongest indicators of the still dominant Cold War mindset. Bin Laden issues a starkly specific attack on a U.S. foreign policy, and Washington responds with defiant words defending a right or liberty that bin Laden has not mentioned and that has nothing to do with his assertion. Thus, bin Laden says, "Get U.S. forces out of the Arabian Peninsula." Washington responds, "You will not prevent our women from going to school." Bin Laden says, "Stop supporting the tyrannical Arab police states that oppress and torture." Washington says, "Freedom is on the march for Arabs." While bin Laden and his lieutenants must shake their heads in frustration over the blatant deafness of U.S. and Western leaders, they have taken full advantage of that self-imposed and possibly fatal handicap. In reviewing the years since 1973, and especially those since the 9/11 attacks and the March 2003 invasion of Iraq, it will become clear that the negative events that have unfolded for America may have been unintended, but were in no sense unforeseeable. The unwinnable insurgencies we now face in Afghanistan and Iraq, the rock-solid hatred of U.S. foreign policy among a huge majority of Muslims and many non-Muslims as well, the flood of heroin entering the West from Southwest Asia, the rising tide